Dudes to Dads, brought to you by Dad University, is a podcast to help men understand and navigate the transition of being a single dude into a family man. How do we make sense of it all? Well, we probably won't be able to, but let's go ahead and have some fun trying. And we are back. I'm Jason Kreidman.
I'm Alan Bush.
And this is Dudes to Dads, episode 185.
Yeah.
Can you believe
Getting
it?
closer, 15 to 200.
You have excellent math skills.
Yeah, I was not even a math major. Can you believe it?
Today, we don't have a lot of guests, but when we do, we make sure they are special.
Yes.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
And we also like having them in our studio because it's a little bit more personal and we get that.
Yeah, we rarely ever do it on Skype or anything.
So I wanted to bring in a friend of mine. The topic of today is about pushing yourself beyond your limits and your limiting beliefs and a lot of that. So I have Alex Nemet here. He is an ultramarathon runner and a dad. And I thought it would be very interesting. And before I introduce him or have him say hello, I'm going to just tell you a couple of things that he's done. Okay. He's been doing ultramarathons for about 15 years. Okay. So let's kind of put that in perspective. We're pretty similar in age. He's approaching his 50th 100 plus race.
100.
Let me repeat that. 100 miles.
Right. Okay.
Yes,
there you go.
100 miles. He's done 50 of those.
Yeah.
100 plus miles.
I don't think I've run 100 miles in my life.
Yeah. No, I
ran track.
I don't think I can attest to that either. He's climbed the highest peaks on 5 of the 7 continents. So he's only got 2 to go. Yeah. One of the things he did was a 352-mile race across the Arctic in ridiculously cold weather.
Yeah.
Pulling a 60-pound sled, and it wasn't by dogs. He pulled the sled as he ran. And right now, he's in the middle of going after what's called the Triple Crown of 200-mile plus races. Mm-hmm. And he's done 2 of those out of the 3, and this is in a span of within about 4 weeks. And my understanding is he's got about 5 weeks or so, and he's going to do another one.
Jeez.
So I wanted to bring him in while he's still here with us.
Obviously, you're out fighting crime somewhere.
Yeah.
Being a superhero.
So Alex, say hello. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. You're able to talk. I know your voice is a little. You just got over racing over 200 miles this past weekend.
Yeah,
so.
I just finished up. My voice is a little rough because I sucked in so much dust, and we were at 10,000 feet in altitude. So
wow. Well, that is pretty crazy. I want to. There's a couple things I want to touch on. I want to understand kind of how you started. I mean, that's one thing. Understand some of your motivation, of course, and this idea that, we have limiting beliefs and the fact that you realizing what you are actually capable of and kind of pushing through that. And then I want to talk about, being a dad as well. I mean, you're doing these amazing things and these amazing feats. And I even know firsthand how close your relationship is with your children of, quote, being a good dad and the ability to do these kinds of things, yet still be an involved father and a family man. So I kind of want to touch all those subjects. Okay. So first, how did you get started? How old were you when you kind of started this, or what made you decide to do it?
So I was approaching 30 years old, and I had a stressful, startup business I was doing, and I was just unhealthy. I was, drinking a lot and, taking my stress out on.
You need a normal 30-year-old.
Yeah, normal 30-year-old going to the bar after work, coming home, and just unhealthy ways to deal with a lot of the stress that was going on. And it's funny. My wife was watching an Oprah episode, and she saw an inspirational thing about a guy that climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. So she decides, that would be good for you. That would be good for me, and as a gift or something that I should do. And I'm like, are you out of your mind?
Have you done any up to this time? Were you a climber, a runner?
Nope.
Really nothing?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing.
You exercised. A little bit?
Nah, maybe a little bit. So she kind of got me to sign up for this thing as a gift. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into?
And what was it? What was it?
It was to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh, Mount Kilimanjaro. Okay.
So
That's a gift.
I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I remember
it's cold there.
it's hot. It's in Africa, but at the top is cold. But so I decided, all right, well, I better start training for this.
Yeah.
So I went out and I'm like, I'm going to go for a 3-mile run around the block. And I literally ran around the block and I was just gassed. I think I had shin splints. I was like, this is not going to work. I started training for this climb and I figured I need to do this.
Yeah.
So,
Did it alter some of your lifestyle then immediately? I mean, the training and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
so
like you sort of
cut
made
down,
this decision.
Yeah, I said, all right,
okay.
if I'm going to do this and we're going to spend the money, I'm gonna be serious about this. So I cut down on the drinking and I started running and doing stuff. And then I thought, well, I have no mountain climbing experience, so I better go. And
what the heck?
And I'm in Ohio at the time, and it's very flat. So a friend of mine and I said, hey, do you want to go climb? We better climb a mountain. I'm like, well, what's a mountain in the United States? Well, Mount Kilimanjaro is 19,000 feet. Why don't I go Mount Rainier? That's 14,000 feet. Let's sign up to climb it. So we
As practice
just to see, if we can do it. So we go and, show up totally clueless and, climb this mountain. So it takes 3 days to climb. There was like 17 people that started out and it was the hardest thing I ever did. And I mean, I was huffing and puffing. I'm like, I have to make it to the top of this thing if I'm going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Did you actually enjoy the process the first time?
It was by far and away the toughest thing I ever did. And I got up to the top, and there was only 4 of us that made it. My buddy, myself, and 2 other people, and everybody else kind of
backed out.
And we got to the top, and I remember coming down, my knees hurt so bad that I'm like, there's no way and I'm ever going to be able to do this. So we get down to the bottom and we're kind of celebrating that we did this, and I'm still thinking to myself. So we talk to the guide and he says, so what's next for you guys? I'm like, well, to be honest with you, I did this so I can climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
Right.
He looks at me and he goes, this is way harder than Mount Kilimanjaro. So but I had thought because it was higher that it was harder, but it's more of a hike. So that was kind of a funny.
That was your intro.
So that made me feel a little bit better.
And so how did Mount Kilimanjaro go?
So that was funny because it was right around September, or just after September 11th happened.
Okay.
So everybody that was on the original trip that I had bailed because nobody wanted to travel or go.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm still doing this. So my guide company said, well, we don't have enough people to do it, but we know a guy in Africa, Simon, that we'll hook you up with. And that's a whole nother story of how I got there.
I can't imagine some of these stories.
Yeah,
Well, I've heard some. But yeah.
So in any event, I fly to Africa not knowing anything. I stay in this village and I'm like literally laying on a dirt floor.
Were you an adventurous guy like before? Like, did you go camping and things like that?
No, I didn't. But
I mean, just to go like, I'm going to go stay in a village in Africa.
Right,
like even that decision.
I'm
before climbing the highest mountain.
But I will tell you, staying in that village and climbing that mountain changed me.
Yeah.
That was like, changed me completely.
That was the first hit of the drug. That was
like,
yeah.
This, I came back a better father, a better, I was just like, it was amazing.
You found your thing.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't a father then yet, but I came back a better husband.
And so you kind of, that gave you the bug or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There was a high, it's your cortisol or whatever is released, and you said, gosh, I'm actually, and also I can do this.
And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed,
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that stuff.
I loved it.
So you did that. So you started sort of climbing. When was where you actually did a race, marathon, that kind of thing?
It's funny. I'm in the airport and
coming home.
No, on the way there, and I meet a guy, Frank, who's one of my best friends that I've done over 17 adventure races with. In our first meeting, we're talking in line, and both of us are kind of clueless. And he's like, boy, I'm glad because we saw some big bugs flying around. He's like, I'm glad
You just met him in the airport?
I met him in the airport and with some other people that we all knew we were kind of climbing the mountain, but he was with somebody else. And he goes, and I go, what do you mean malaria? He goes, you didn't take anything for malaria? I go, no. He goes, so that was like the first thing that he starts laughing, and we hit it off. And so we exchanged emails. I saw him on the mountain and decided to do, and hooked up to decide to climb a mountain in Russia. So he, at the time, said, hey, I'm training for a race called Badwater. I'm like, what's that? And he said, it's a 135-mile race across Death Valley. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Why would someone do that?
That's impossible.
And Death Valley, for people that don't know, it's the middle of the desert.
Yeah, it's the highest recorded temperatures in the world, next to the Sahara.
Right.
And you run across.
Let's just go run.
And it's a race across it in the middle of July.
Oh, that totally makes sense.
If you run, you have to run on the white line so your shoes don't melt. How hot it gets. So I'm trying to grasp in my head. I'm like, what do you mean? So we climb this mountain in Russia, and he's going off to do this. And I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, so how do you train for this? And he starts telling me, and I'm thinking to myself, we just climbed this mountain. I'm like, maybe I'll try something like that. and that's how it all began, because we climbed.
So it was Frank's fault.
It is Frank's fault. We our wives kind of are grudgingly accepting, but sometimes really get scared when we get together because we come up with some crazy ideas. So.
Wow, that is fascinating. So you did the first race with him?
No, he did that race, and we all decided to do a race across it's called the Marathon des Sables, which is supposed to be one of the toughest races in the world, and it's across the Sahara Desert. It's 100.
So that was the first one.
That was my first race. I'd never even run a 5K, but I signed up to do this thing because he talked me into it. Him and another guy that we know from Turkey.
And how was that race?
So he ended up, both the guys that were supposed to go with me ended up bailing. Oh, okay. So I went there by myself.
What?
And it was, I ended up, doing very well. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is something that,
like the climbing, the running, I got this.
This is, I'm in my element. I found a place, something that I can do where I can completely disconnect. Yeah. And I actually did well in the race, and I'm like, all right, what's next?
Wow. So that was the start. And now you've done 50 of them or so.
Or something similar.
Yeah.
Of something similar.
Wow.
That is crazy.
That's nuts.
How do you, at that time, I'm imagining like the malaria shot or anything else, of not really knowing how to prepare.
What do you mean malaria?
You sort of over the years, obviously, have honed your craft quite a bit. And, we've talked, and I understand like everything from food preparation, or like how you eat during a race, before the race, your clothing, all of that. Can you speak a little bit to like what you've learned over time?
Yeah, and I've learned the hardest way possible. I've had the wrong shoes. Road shoes and blisters, and you don't even know some of the things that not only can your stomach go, a little thing like your blisters on your feet can.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And the worst thing is chafing. Which can worse than any muscle pain. Period. And I've got
so your legs rubbing together,
legs and everything else running together. I've got some stories around that, but I won't get into.
I think I heard that one around the campfire.
Yeah, I won't get too graphic, but there's a funny one where my wife walked in on me. Anyway.
Yeah. That is just, it's so crazy. So even like the food preparation, I know, you're knowing, what to eat at what interval. Mm-hmm. You even said, you've lost 15, 20 pounds during the course of a race.
Yeah. And so like the last race I just did, I lost about 20 pounds. Right. And some of that's water, some of that's muscle, and some of that's fat. But yeah, you can. So because your stomach can go, you can only take in so many calories. So I've learned
So before a race, what do you do?
So before a race, for days before, I'll just drink a lot of electrolytes and just get my. And the old way used to be kind of carbo loading.
Yeah.
But that can only last so long. When you're in an ultra event, for me,
you go beyond the carb.
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of fats and.
Because these runners aren't like lean. They're not like really lean, skinny guys. Or
no, I mean, there are a lot of them are. A lot of them are. I mean, the elite guys are, but I like to, for me, what works is to have some fat and some energy stores on me that help me get through some of those times. Because sometimes you can't, your stomach can go. And if you're eating a lot of sugars and, the sugars can only last. So I found out what works for me, but everybody's different.
Yeah.
In some races, you carry all your own food. And most races, there's aid stations along the way where they'll have a buffet of food. Some people like to joke that this is just a giant buffet that you just go to at each one. I've never gained weight on a race, but some people said that they have because sometimes
if you walk it, or no, you're required to get through it in a certain amount of time.
So there's cutoffs.
Oh, gotcha.
That you got to hit. And some races like Leadville, which is all in Colorado, over 10,000 feet. That was the second race I did, and that one almost killed me.
Imagine.
Just the elevation.
And the cutoffs are so tight, and the elevation, is challenging.
And you've talked about some of the food during the race. I mean, from pickle juice to like wanting a soda or,
So this past race, I mean, you name it, they had a really, really good stuff. They had cheeseburgers. They had.
So after a race, that's what you crave, you said.
So for me, and there's a lot of runners that are vegetarians and stuff, and they get disgusted by me, but I crave bloody, salty meat, bacon.
Wow.
Frank and I joke all the time, like he'll go get 3 Wendy's triples after a race, and there's nothing better.
You've lost, you said 15 pounds in the course of, 3 or 4 days. So during the race, you said there's like the aid stations every 20 miles or something like that.
So certain races they're a little bit shorter, but the past 2 big ones, they were 20 miles apart, which was the most challenging. That's sometimes 8 hours between aid stations.
Oh, wow. No. And you run through the night most of the time. That's how it.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned it, like the course is not exact all the time. In other words, from point A to point B and how do you get it? Like, do you have a GPS on you?
So yeah. So most 100-mile races, there's aid stations about 5-6 miles apart, and you can finish those between 20 and 30 hours. Those are the typical races.
The easy ones.
Well, they say now with these new 200-mile races are the new 100-mile races. And so these were a whole nother level. These were.
But how do you know the course? Like if you're in the middle of the night and it's not like there's a huge pack of people.
So they have markers, like reflective markers hanging from trees.
So can you see one marker to the next?
You can see one, and they're about a quarter mile apart. Okay. So if you go a long time without seeing one, you might be off course.
Got it.
These past 2...
Are you tracked?
Yeah. So these not typically, but in these 200-mile races, you have a GPS tracker.
Okay.
Because if you get
lost,
remote.
You're screwed.
Yeah. You're so spread out, and so.
Do you typically run with somebody too?
So it depends. So the first of the 200s that I did a few weeks ago, really interesting. I went about 8 hours without seeing a soul, and it was the middle of the night. I'm crossing like freezing rivers, and I'm like, what am I doing? Pitch black. My headlamp goes out.
See, that does not sound fun to me. Yeah, when I just have difficulty. Yeah. I say that, but yet understanding like there's almost like a spirituality about it of some kind. Like, and that's obviously we're going to get to like sort of what drives you. But the average person, I think, has difficulty like understanding it. and maybe unless you experience it, because it's like when you talk about that, you're like, it's freezing, my feet hurt, I'm chafing, I don't have food for 8 hours. I'm like, I'm trying to figure out like, what would I do that for?
Those are some of the negatives, but the positives for me is when I'm out there, when I'm in the woods or in the mountains, for some reason, I feel like I'm in my element.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's almost like a euphoria.
Yeah. Like I'm in my element. For some reason, I enjoy the solitude in the woods, and everybody has, I think, something where they feel like they're in their element.
Yeah.
And for me, it's
found
that.
it.
And I've never once on a race ever thought about work.
Yeah.
Ever. I've never carried a phone with me except for the last two where you're required to, for the GPS. And, you're you're in the moment. You're thinking about your breath. You're thinking about what you're drinking. And if you do have some thoughts, they're all around your family, legacy.
You're kind of realizing what's important to you at that point.
It's not like you're on vacation, you get an email and you get distracted in Hawaii or wherever, and you go, you're on your laptop for the next 3 hours.
Right, yeah, for sure. You have to be in that moment. It's very zen type of thing where you have to be focused. Yeah.
So one of the things you mentioned is, some of the, you've had like a really good friend throughout this, and some of the relationships that you've built. It's a pretty elite group of people who do this. So I would imagine like you're sort of akin to each other, and it's both female and male. It's there's both who are very, very exceptional at this.
Yeah. So, sometimes it's really hard to explain exactly what we've gone through on one of these unless you've been there. So, some of the relationships, like Frank Fumick, for example, we've probably done 17, 18 adventure races around the world together, know each other very, very well. He's probably sick of me and all my stories that I've had. But
how long you known him?
We've known each other.
Airport, right?
Yeah, we met, I think, in 2001, we met in the airport, exchanged emails, and now our families go on trips together. And and then a perfect example is this Triple Crown that we're doing. And I've hooked up with a couple of people during this race. We have kind of like an unofficial team, Dennis Williams and Katra Corbett, who's probably one of the most elite ultra runners in the world. She's done, both her and Frank have done way more than I have, and we've had a good time. That first race we had if it wasn't for them, we had laughed our way through the last 100 miles.
No, I would imagine it feels good to have that support, like as you're running. Because there's, what else is there going on? Like you're listening to music for that long.
No, and sometimes it's not even talking to or having conversations. It's just having somebody near you that just
feels safer,
and just kind of, because when you're by yourself in the middle of the woods for a long time, it messes with your head, and then seeing fresh faces and sometimes really helps you through some dark spots. And another guy, Adam Scully, oh boy, he was new to this, and I kind of helped him along a little bit, and we kind of stayed with each other. And we had a conversation the other morning where we both kind of got a little emotional about what we just did.
Yeah.
And so, some of these things, you try to explain to people that haven't done them. You can explain so much, but when you actually truly experience it with somebody, it's a little different.
It's almost like going through a boot camp or something together.
Yeah.
It's that deep connection, I would imagine. It's like, we've gone through this. Mm-hmm. Like it's something that's obviously so difficult and unique. There's only a handful of people in the world comparing, that are able to do this or that do this. Like you said, even this Triple Crown, this triple thing that you're doing, how many people finished that in the world?
I think last year, 6 to 8 people.
Wow. That's not a lot.
There's definitely more signed up for this year. So there is a lot of people doing it, and it's hard.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What'd you say? So you have another race in 5 weeks?
In 4 weeks. It's the Moab, and this one, there's supposed to be 200. This one's 240. There's supposed to be the Triple Crown of 200s, and the race director Candace has just done an amazing job with the places she's put these and the difficulty.
But she likes to make them difficult.
I think she likes it a little bit.
She's not running though. She's just watching everybody run.
She's doing a good job. She's put on a couple of the most amazing races that I've seen. Her company's Destination Trail, and it's definitely changed me.
That's awesome. What do you feel like leading up to the race? I mean, what is that like? Are you nervous about the races? I mean, because in coinciding with that, like, I think it was surprising to me to understand your training is not that crazy. Like, it's not that elaborate, I should say. Like, I don't see you out there training every day.
No. And that's kind of what works for me is, less is more.
You risk getting hurt.
Yeah. I mean, there's guys that put 80 miles in a week, 90 miles, and, that's just not for me. And I think you get more injuries. So I like to do more, swimming, just different types of things, just to avoid injury. But, as far as I'm always nervous before any race.
What are you nervous about?
About the unknown of what's going to happen.
Do you worry about your physical, oh, I hope I don't get hurt, or that you're kind of past that?
So it's kind of a little bit of everything.
That's how I look at it. Like, even when I did the half marathon, I was so worried, like my knees are going to hurt or my ankles are going to hurt.
So that's interesting, the pain thing. So talking about it, I'm always nervous, and I think that's what's helped me finish almost every race that I've done. And because I'm scared, I'm not going into it like, it's not going to be, even the ones that seem easier, I still go into it with a serious, with a fear, not like, that's an easy one. And that's the challenging thing sometimes at home, because when I'm getting ready for it's almost like physically, my brain knows what it's about to get into now that I've been doing them. So I sleep more.
So your whole family knows, like, if it's a couple days or a week before a race, don't bother Dad.
I've gotten better at it. I used to be really probably not the greatest person to be around, days before, but I've really worked on that, and that's one thing that's gotten better.
Got it. Wow. And one of the things I felt was really interesting too is the sleeping. So just, this past weekend, you did a 200 plus, race. Talk about, when do you sleep?
Okay, so this is really interesting. And the first time I experienced sleep deprivation was on that 352-mile race with two other buddies, one from Australia, Hully, and my buddy Frank, and where we hallucinated like you wouldn't believe. Okay, because we were up for so long.
How long did you go without sleeping? Or do you not even know?
Well, that was like a 6-day race, and we would just go until it was like impossible to stay awake, and some of us would be hallucinating and some of us wouldn't. I mean, we found where Kim Jong-un was hiding his nuclear missiles. We saw whole neighborhoods that weren't even there. Just the craziest thing. The interesting thing on this past race was I was running with a guy, Dennis, who I've become very close with, just meeting him over the past two races. It's amazing. You spend, I have friends that I go back 10 years with that I haven't spent as much time as, as some of the people you meet here. And
sure.
It was funny. There was three of us, another guy, Carlos from El Salvador. And I was hallucinating in the middle of the day. I'm like, do you guys see that right there? And it was like a mermaid on the end of a ship. You know how they have those things? And they're like, oh my God, I do. And we all saw the same thing in the woods. And that's the first time we've all seen the same hallucination. And we got up to it and it was just some tree trunk or something. But that
would have been cool if it was a mermaid.
But definitely the weirdest things. And I can talk more about.
But how much did you sleep over the last 4 days?
So this race, very similar to the first one, we did, I started running on Friday morning. So ran all day Friday, all night Friday night, all day Saturday, and then
you didn't stop.
No stopping. All day Saturday night, and then on Sunday I was like, I got into a sleep station and was like, all right, I probably should
Saturday afternoon,
Sunday morning.
Oh, Sunday morning. So Friday morning so 48 hours straight. Without resting.
And then I got into a sleep station and I said, I should probably get some sleep here, but my feet hurt and everything. And I laid down and I slept for about 15 minutes and I woke up. I couldn't, and I just kept going. So it was interesting. Some people are able to sleep a lot. I was not. So this 87-hour race or whatever, 4 sunrises, I slept 15 minutes.
Wow.
And
my goodness.
So it's amazing.
And I saw him at the end of this, and he did not look like he had not slept. Or you didn't look like somebody who had only slept 15 minutes,
Yeah. So it's really interesting what the mind can do. And I can get to that of how much of it's physical and how much of it's mental.
It's very interesting. Yeah. Because you're of the mindset that it's, 99%?
99% between the ears. You need to have some physical, but there's, once you start having negative thoughts, like my stomach's going to go. I feel like my stomach's feeling kind of funny. Guess what? It's going to start to go.
So triggering it.
Or if you're
How do you stop that?
You just got to keep a positive attitude. You got to laugh about what you're doing. You meet somebody else, you're like, what are we doing? And just stay positive. Let me just get to the next aid station and just keep positive thoughts in your head. And that's what gets you through it. But I had a couple out of body experiences towards the end that were crazy. So towards the end of this race, I remember at around mile 80, I was like, we were running down these jagged river rocks and my feet were so shredded. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like literally crying to myself. That's how much pain my feet were in. Kind of got through that. I'm at mile 85 going to one of the last aid stations, and it's a big climb. I remember climbing, and I was with my buddy Dennis, and we start moving, and we're doing pretty good. And we get to the last aid station. I'm like, we're almost there. And I didn't want to stick around there. I actually grabbed a Coke at that point and some potato chips and ate those. And
it's like fast fuel.
Yeah, just because I knew I had just a downhill 8 miles in to finish. And the weirdest thing, I just took off and my pain went away in my feet.
Wait, this is at what mile?
Mile 198.
Oh, jeez.
So you still had 7 miles. So that's it's supposed to be a 200-mile race, but it's 207. Those
extra 7 are horrible.
So I start running and I'm like, all of a sudden, I feel like I'm floating. This is the craziest out-of-body experience I have.
Like no pain?
No pain, and I'm flying. And I feel like I'm flying, but the weird thing is I can see, it's like I'm above myself looking at myself because it's dark. It's like
You're watching yourself.
I had an out-of-body experience watching myself run.
People don't need drugs. Yeah, they can just do ultramarathons.
Seriously, yeah.
And the interest, so it's, and then I finished and ate a bunch of food and
well, you talk about the pain real quick because you had mentioned about that, or I was hearing you talk about that a little bit before. When something hurts that bad, like your feet, how do you push through that? Because, I think for people to understand, granted, you can equate it to anything where you're facing some sort of difficulty, facing some sort of adversity, and physical pain is not easy to deal with.
No.
So how do you push through that? What is like you said, okay, the one thing is you can keep positive, but when there's cuts on your feet, how do you overcome that? And how does the pain manifest itself?
So it's really interesting. So beginning of the race, about 11 miles in, my right knee on this downhill is killing me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never felt pain like this before. I don't know if I'm.
You're only 11 miles in.
And I'm freaking out. I'm like, should I be worried about this?
Yeah.
And it hurts for a while. And then all of a sudden my left knee starts to hurt, but my right knee stops hurting. I'm like, well, that's weird. And then my right ankle starts to hurt. My left knee stops. And then my hip, it's like the pain, and then my shoulder, and then my ear. It just kind of moves around your body. And it's kind of like your body can compensate for itself. It's the most amazing thing. Now, I could have just stopped and said, my knee hurts.
Which most people do, or a lot of people, not necessarily in these races, but I'm saying in general, that's what people would do.
Yeah. And
you get to a certain point.
So far, knock on wood, I haven't had anything completely debilitate me. I've been in pain, but it goes away.
Well, so for the other people in these races, how many people typically start versus how many people finish?
So in your typical race, let's say 300 people start, depending on how tough it is or the conditions, 150 finish.
Okay. Well,
so
and people are airlifted.
No, I haven't seen anything. So that's the amazing thing is you would think people would be dying and having heart attacks and, stuff like that. And I haven't seen anything. I mean, I've seen some people be injured and, and had to drop because of, issues, but I've never seen anything major like you would think. I've actually seen more stuff like deaths and ambulances at like regular marathons than I have at these.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess if people that are doing it at this level are a little bit more experienced, or are there a lot of first timers?
So some of these races, you need to qualify and have done some things. So there's some other races where you can just sign up and go for it. So sometimes depends on the race.
Wow, that is amazing. So one of the other areas I wanted to touch on was, the fact that you are a dad. And that's the idea that you can do all of these things and still, maintain, like you said, you think about your family when you're there. I think I've heard you say too, even like on one of your last excursions, it's like it was you really missed your family. Like that was something that you started thinking about a lot more as you've gotten older. How do you manage that idea that, you still have to be a good father, but you obviously take this time for yourself and to be able to do that and being able to balance that, So
it's a tough thing. So now what I'm trying to do is do like one or two major things. So this year was the Triple Crown of 200s. And I had the conversation with my wife at the beginning of the year that this is going to happen and this is something I'd like to do. So she's kind of given me the green light to do, one or two things. Last year it was Frank and I climbed Mount Vincent in Antarctica. And that ended up being a little bit longer trip where I was just like starting to agonize over missing my family, even though it was beautiful and it was an amazing trip. But I was, there's been a big shift for me from when I originally started doing it to, hey, I don't want to have my freedom taken away as a new dad. Like I still want to do my stuff.
Right.
Now, I want to be with my
How do you
kids.
balance it both? Yeah.
So that's really challenging. So I may not train as hard. So I'm not going to be, in the top 10. I'm not going to do what it takes to be there because my family will suffer. I'll do what it takes to finish. But, if it's a Sunday afternoon and, my family wants to go to the pool or something and I'm supposed to train, I'll go to the pool, and if I have to get some miles in later at night, I'll do it.
Which I've seen you do, and participate in things. Which, you came back from the race and then went to a meeting with your kid that we all were at a party, and it's like he hadn't slept yet, Yeah. But you made sure that you were there, and I'm saying those are the kinds of things I think obviously your kids appreciate, and your family appreciates the fact that you are present and making sure that you're there for those kinds of moments.
And it wasn't always that way. It's something I had to learn and sacrifice a few things. But now my we had a meeting at work, and we always today, and we always say, hey, what's your business best for the week and personal best? And everybody's expecting me to say personal best. Would be the race. But, no, as I took my middle daughter to a swim meet that she was so nervous for, or a swim test to make the swim team. And she had failed it months ago, and she'd worked so hard, and she would have been devastated if she failed, and she passed. And I literally welled up, and we went out for ice cream. And that was my, sure, I finished the race. And I have
That's cool.
Another story about my oldest daughter with me at the Badwater race.
Let's hear that one. What was that one?
So Badwater was in 2008, and this is supposed to be the toughest foot race on the planet, and it's a little bit different than the race I just did. It's 135 miles, and it starts at Badwater, which is the lowest point in Death Valley, which is 282.
Oh, this was that first one you were talking. You talked about the first race that you were going to do, or that Frank did.
No, that was the Sahara race. That was another hot one, but this one is in the United States, and it's called Badwater, and it's all on the road, and it's all uphill, and it's in the middle of July, and it can get up to 130 degrees. I mean, so you have to heat train. I mean, this is a brutal race. So this is when I was going a little crazy and doing a lot of these things. And we had Lucy, and she was about 2 years old. My oldest daughter was 15 at the time. And I had been training very, very hard for this race. So it's a super challenging race. And about 2 weeks before, Julie finds out that she's pregnant. Oh, wow. So I'm elated. We're like, and she's like, "Are you kidding me? This is only 16 months after Lucy," but I'm like, "Hey, this is awesome." So,
so this was going to be your third child.
This is going to be our third child, and the whole family's ready to go to this race. And Julie, she's like, "You know what? I'm just going to go get checked out before I go, see if it's okay to go to the race." So she couldn't get an appointment with our doctor. So she goes to another hospital to just get things checked out. So she goes into the hospital, and they do an ultrasound, and the doctor says, "I'm sorry, but there's no baby. It's just a sac, but there's no heartbeat." So we're devastated. And, the doctor's like, "Well, hey, if you want to, take care of this, we can, so you can go on the trip." And
how far along was she?
She had just taken a test.
Okay.
So she just found
8
out.
weeks or something. Yeah.
And so I'm devastated at this point. I don't even want to go to the race. I'm just like, it's a very sad time.
Yeah.
And so she's like, "You know what? You've already planned. You already have your crew. Frank, I have a bunch of people paid for that are coming out there. Just go do it. I'll stay here and, go with Sam." So I'm kind of like, okay, I'll go. And so it was just kind of a dark way to start the race. So we get out there, and I start getting ready for the race. And, I go out about mile 40. Things are falling apart. I'm hot. I'm puking. Everything's seizing up. My head is just not in it, and I'm just barely moving. And so slowly, around mile 60, 80, this is like, maybe 2 days or 24 hours into it, or 20, I can't even remember. And my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter's on the crew too. So she's out there.
She's
so
helping.
That's helping, so every mile you go in this race, you can go to your van and get drinks, and there's a crew following you, every runner. And so I remember it was the morning, and the sun was coming up, and I was running through this valley. And this is in Death Valley, where they have fighter jets and stuff flying around, and there's nobody around me. I see this fighter jet flying at me, and it kind of like sees me. And, I kind of put my arms up in the air, and it comes and it shoots down and goes right over my head. It feels like it's 10 feet over my head, but it's not.
Right.
So I get these total chills, and, it's just kind of this, and I'm like coming up to the van. I'm like, "Hey, did you see that?" And they're like, "Hey," and Lisa, who was on my crew, or she wasn't on, Lori, who was on my crew, hands the phone to Sam, and Sam gives me the phone. It's my wife, and she's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I went to go see our doctor."
Oh, wow.
And guess what? There's a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I'm like tearing up, emotion. I get this new boost of energy, and I just start hauling.
It's mile 80.
Mile 80. No, I get to mile 85. The wheels came off again. I had a little boost of energy. So anyway, cool. The last 50 miles, I ran it in. I had like the third or fourth fastest time for the last 50 miles. And the best part about that whole trip is my 15-year-old daughter was with me. I got to share that experience. And the real way to do this race is to go to the top of Mount Whitney, which you have to get a permit for. You used to be able to do it. So my buddy Aaron, her and I set out to do this. And I said, "Hey, honey, however far you want to go, we'll just kind of, to my daughter." And she just kept going. And
just got the bug
and going, and Aaron and I, and if Aaron wouldn't have been with us, if it was just me and her, it might have been a little bit different. But then there were some other amazing runners and people that were just like, "Go, Sam."
Was this right after the race?
Yeah. So you go up to the top of Mount Whitney.
Oh, at the end.
Yeah. The race finishes at the portals, which is 8,000 feet.
Okay.
Then we, slept and then went up the mountain the next day. My daughter summits Mount Whitney.
Wow.
And I am just in tears. Forget about the race, forget about how well I did and that, but
and you remember that, she remembers it, obviously. It's a story.
Just that I'm going to have a son. My daughter climbs with me, and that was the most rewarding thing. I mean, I still can't. I still get the chills thinking about that story.
That is good, man. That's awesome. That's a good one to end with, man. I like that stuff. Yeah, I think just bringing it all together, it's this idea that you have pushed yourself in so many ways, but like have become better for it, and the end result of with other people of feeling like this limiting belief that we're not able to do things, and you've been faced with so many different situations that you've been allowed to quit. Like, in other words, it would have been fine. It probably would have been okay, but you didn't. And it sort of have made you who you are now, and it's just an interesting lesson for people. It's like, you don't have to be somebody who's climbing mountains or doing ultramarathons, but this idea with all these different things in our life of these limiting beliefs of thinking that we're not able to do something for whatever reason, and sort of persevering and pushing through that. And so, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, your story is amazing. I just, kind of reflecting for myself and like, okay, now what can I do? Which you were the cause of the Day of Madness, which I did speak about on.
Yes.
Yeah, you did have me do that, and you were the motivating person behind that, which I forget what episode that was, but we did go over it.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that, because that was something too where I pushed myself physically to do stuff that I had never really done, and especially all together all at once. I mean, I'd never ran, I'd never done anything. Granted, it was only 13 miles. Mm-hmm. But still, like that idea of being able to push yourself through.
Yeah, and the life experience you get from it changes you every time. And it doesn't have to be an ultra marathon. I well up when I see somebody that trained their butt off for a half marathon and finished, or it's.
Well, I remember how excited you were for us, the other guys that were running. And it was like, this was like a stroll in the park for him, and it was 4 of us. And like, I had never done anything even close to this, and he was so supportive and so happy. I could see like you were so happy that we were all doing this, and it was something that's really cool. So I think you get that bug, and you want other people to enjoy it as well,
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah. I mean, thank you for coming on and doing this stuff. Alan, if people want to get a hold of us or have questions, whether it's for us or Alex, what should they do?
They should email us, podcast@dudesTodads.com, or maybe hit us up on one of our social media channels, Twitter @DudesToDads, Facebook DudesToDads.com. Please go to YouTube and go to Dad University. A lot of great stuff from Jason on there. And any podcatcher you see us in, please leave a review. Pretty much Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you see us, leave a review, and it helps perpetuate my grammar and the show.
Well, Alan, thank you. Alex, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It was really inspiring.
Yeah, I'm like inspired now. I want to go run.
Record that, please.
Okay, yes. There we go.
You heard, actually, this is recorded. So I want to play that back in a couple weeks and say, hey, did you run?
Yeah.
So thank you guys, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.